This is the Guardroom Podcast, Episode 3, with Bane Welton and me, Ben Boyle. Good evening, Bane.
Good evening, Boyle.
I do not want to see this core die. It has done so much good for the world through the leaders of character it produces, yet the current climate trajectory of the core suggests that we will soon lose that divine ability to develop the best leaders in the world for the world. None of us want to see this happen, yet we must stand by and watch as our traditions crumble before us, or we must not. If this is student leadership, let it be just that. Let us take this bull by the horns, no matter your rank, title, or class year. Let us do what we have always done best and can do better than those who seek to simply manage us. Let us not pursue new army and old army. Let us pursue best army. Today's guest, in my opinion, is a dark horse in the band. He started out in B Battery, exhibition block and fish drill team during the COVID core, was a cymbal freak and the I band bass drummer. As a junior, he served as the first sergeant of B Battery before some drama went down. Now as a Zip, he's a member of the Ross Volunteer Company and a squad leader in B Company. This man is the embodiment of old Army, in my humble opinion. He really knows what it means to be an Aggie and a cadet here in our Corps. Matthew Marquez, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Ben. Man, you flatter me, dude.
Yeah, well,
I mean, said such kind words, man.
Every conversation we have, you were one of the three guys that I started this podcast in mind because I was like, I gotta sit down with this guy, and I don't think enough people have some of the thoughts that you've had about the Corps, and just like a lot of what you've said has been like, man, I gotta get that out to some people. Just, I mean, even over dinner tonight with Jordan, it was like, this is just too good to not go unrecorded.
Yeah, no, dude, I appreciate you having me on, man. I love the opportunity just to kind of just dump everything. I guess the Corps has given me the experiences over the past couple of years, so that somebody can benefit from, in the future. Yeah, I think you were reading from, because I haven't read it since sophomore year, but that document, the Best Army document, you're reading from that, man. I don't know what they're feeding me in Duncan.
Or Psalms.
Yeah, Psalms. But, yeah, dude, man, it's funny to see the difference from then and now,
Yeah, we can, I guess we just start there. If you want to talk, I know right before we started recording, we're talking about where this came from. So you want to give a little background into it? And I think we just jump right into that document. Like you said, read it through.
Yeah, sure, brother. Yeah, so I guess to get some background before we start. My spring semester of my sophomore year, I was enrolled in Psalms with Dr. Tony Brown.
Okay.
Love him to death. There's one of the greatest Psalms instructors I ever had, if not the greatest. A fantastic guy. Real intentional leadership. He cared deeply about every single one of us and always showed up with a great attitude to every class and was super intentional, man. But we felt that, and as sophomores in the Corps, if I can remember correctly, it's 2 years ago. It feels like forever. So many things have happened, but the Corps was in kind of a limbo kind of state, and then of course we're sophomores. We've just got done with our first semester being upperclassmen and having kind of the blinders taken off. You can kind of see the guts of the operations of the things that produced your fish experience and everyone else's. We're all ambitious and we all have things we want to do, people we want to help, and being in Dr. Brown's class didn't help. It's like, oh man, he's so passionate, it makes you want to do the same thing. Yep. So I remember, dude, after every class, just about every class, myself, Sam Mueller, Seco commander, and then Seth Wallach, chaplain, we all stayed back and talked with Dr. Brown for sometimes close to an hour. I had no classes after that. So that was like the kind of a highlight of my day. And we just talk and ask Dr. Brown questions, and he would just create like a dialogue with us, just asking us questions and say, hey, how's the Corps for you guys, and what are y'all's views in the future? And then one day after a particularly red-ass motivating conversation, I remember I went back to my dorm and I just started typing on my computer, man, because just some of the conversations that we'd had that day were like super, just kind of it was kind of like the encapsulation of everything that we talked about. So I remember I typed it up, sent it over to Sam and Seth, and they got their take on it and everything. So yeah, basically an amalgamation of all of our ideas. So disclaimer, I have not, besides what Ben just read to me here, I have not read this since the sophomore year that I can remember. So I might, we'll see.
I remember you and I had a conversation as well because we were both announced as first sergeants, and you forwarded this to me, which is how I got a hold of it. I think either because I was friends with Sam and Seth back then as well, so one of those two probably introduced us and got this conversation rolling.
Man, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess
cool.
I'll read it.
Just hop right into it.
So, Best Army. So, forward. There exists a problem there in this Corps. It is a problem which we all know in our own way. We experience it every day, and it is the sole proprietor of our feelings of inadequacy. We do not know our mission. It may be stated by those that lead us, but it is not felt. Such is evident in our standards, our morale, and in our recent recruiting numbers. It is obvious that something must be done, yet we struggle to know exactly what it is we must do to solve this. It is not even communicated to us from upper leadership what we should do. Yet actions are taken by them that actively destroy our Texas Aggie spirit and morale, and that makes, it distrustful, and rightly so. I will not claim to understand this issue fully. It is far more complicated than we could ever hope to diagnose. I will not claim to be the expert on the solution either. However, I will claim that what is needed in this Corps of Cadets, and I'm confident that I'm not the only one, is hope. I think that's evidenced by everyone around this table right now. I'm just going to say that. We got to continue. We desperately need hope for the future of Aggie land and Aggies everywhere and forever, for we are the keepers of the spirit, and such is our duty.
I was going to pause you right there.
Sure.
It might be easier to break this down paragraph by paragraph, but the reason I paused it right there. So I just want to talk a little bit about where this document came out sophomore year.
Yes.
And so for a good bit of the Corps, they were not there for that. In fact, you could argue the majority of the Corps. Yeah. So you could talk about a little bit of your thoughts on where the Corps was at the moment. I could talk a little bit about my thoughts on Corps morale, and give you some of that CT side of the Corps, just cause,
yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm sure it was different, but I remember reading through this and going or as I'm looking at this, man, that was a rough period to be in the Corps. Don't know if you could make an argument for whether it's gotten better or worse, but just wanted to tackle some of that, the headspace as we're writing this document.
Sure, yeah, I know if I can hop in the time machine real quick.
Right.
Well, hopefully I get everything right, because like I said, 2 years isn't that long ago, but when you're in the Corps, man, so many things happen. It feels like a different man wrote this document, a younger man. I'll tell you, the Corps itself at the time, from what I remember, of course, I'm a sophomore, and I'm just now coming into this role, and I'm seeing, I'm having conversations with white belts. I'm seeing the behind-the-scenes work. I'm getting involved. For example, doing fish drill team my freshman year, made a lot of wonderful friendships and relationships and connections across the Corps. And I think having those conversations with them as well kind of got this idea of the conversations that were going on at the time. So I know for sure this was it seems to me, because obviously nowadays we have the March to 3000 is the big deal. I know I mentioned recruiting in here too, so the conversation must have already started there.
Yep.
We had just come out of COVID after this, right? And so being a freshman during COVID, I guess I'll kind of tangent on that a little bit, because I think it's going to really help preface the mindset and the mind space for writing this. But the freshman experience in the Corps of COVID, at least for me, was one of, I don't want to say abandonment, because there were definitely people that were there to try doing everything they could to help us. But like I said, doing everything they could, there wasn't really much you could do. For example, I never really saw a real pisshead sophomore training experience until I joined FDT, coming from my outfit, BBAT. Now, the guidance I'm sure they were given was what was basically, you can't come inside to you can't cross the threshold of a freshman's room, or fish hole, right? You can't come in there and do any of that stuff. So of course we did all the pull-outs. We'd hide stuff, like just mounds of Gatorade bottles and unfolded blankets behind the corners, out of the sight lines of a sophomore. So of course it was cool in its own unique experience. But then again, we never really had zips in our room. We never had zips in our whole talking. We didn't pull any boots, as far as I think we still did that, but it isn't really, it's not as let's say, it doesn't stand out in my head as one of the things that we did. I remember at FOW, we'd just go grab our Dunkin' meals and sit, me and my old lady, just eating Dunkin' meals, which was fun in its own right, and it gave us a lot of opportunity to get away. But a lot of the beauty of the freshman experience in the Corps is the utter helplessness. And I hate to say it, I don't want to say it this way, but the kind of the sink or swim mentality. And we were given so many opportunities to get away that I don't feel like we were as, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but I don't think we were as bought in as we should have been. I think now myself, I love A&M. My grandpa was in the Corps in the 60s, class of 65 G2, and my uncle was in class of 95 Squadron 12. He did for FDT as Guide On and the Hound. so I love the Corps, and they're the reason I joined. And so I was really bought in myself too. So this experience that I was experiencing just kind of to me represented everything I'd ever known, and so I latched onto it. And so going into sophomore year, things really changed. And myself, sophomore year, I was on cadre with a couple of my buddies too, and so we got to really see what a real FOW was like, and man, was that taxing. It was difficult, all these different new things, because we're learning how to train, and we never really, transition training was very minimal, because it was during that COVID experience. So I know I went on a big tangent there, but to kind of rope it back in, that kind of removed experience left a lot of people, I feel like there was a lot of issues with buy-in. And that's huge for an organization, is to develop buy-in, especially from those that you're investing in, the ones that are going to lead this organization. Like us, we're Zips now, right? And as freshmen, right now as a Zip, some of the, getting through these last few weeks as a Zip, they're difficult because, you're burnt out, or you're tired, or you've got all these things going on with the rest of your life ahead of you. But one of the things that's motivated me the most has been underclassmen, with all their passion and their grit and their buy-in that they have, because we've gotten that experience back a little bit.
Yeah.
And so myself back then, that was something that we didn't really have as freshmen too. And then again, that can also be unique, because that's just my outfit experience. I never really got to go to someone else's hallway as a freshman, like almost at all. Even being an FTT, we just kind of didn't go. And you couldn't be, well, I wouldn't say that we were to adhere to these rules too much, but 15 minutes was the technical maximum time that you could spend in someone else's room at any given time.
Yeah,
and more than 3 people, no fish holes, none of that, fallout holes. So I think that perspective, a lot of people felt unsatisfied, because there's a lot of people that come to the Corps looking for that experience, and then it also underdeveloped and unsatisfied. I think that was the mindset that we're coming from here. And then also from, when you finally get your eyes opened, I'd say as a sophomore and going into now you're a cadet, upperclassman, you hear those conversations, and you also tend to regurgitate quite a bit of the things you hear from above. So whether it's your professors, right, or it's your upperclassmen, the things that they say, or the things that you start to say. I feel like the sophomore role is one of those also, but not to say neglected, but not enough conversations happen between upperclassmen and sophomores.
No, we can say neglected.
Yeah.
It's a sad fact of life.
Unfortunately, yeah. And so it leaves a lot of us to kind of, not by myself, I'm a big existentialist kind of guy. I love to create meaning everywhere that I can. Of course,
Yep.
that's what Aggies do, right? In my opinion. But I feel like that's where a lot of this opening paragraph is coming from, is man, I feel lost. Let's make some meaning, because there's all this stuff about old army and new army, and so that's best army, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's actually rally together and create our own meaning. Let's strive, because if what we have now is not what we had before, and it doesn't feel good enough, and we don't like where it's going, well, let's go somewhere else. Let's disrupt that. Let's elevate, transformational leadership and whatnot. Try to do some of that, which is, it's funny, I think sophomores in a lot of ways are the most capable of doing that, have the most energy for that, and then here we are, only in charge of menial tasks, whether it be barbecue or sweeping the hallway or training freshmen, which then again, training freshmen is no way a menial task, especially through fire team leader kind of stuff and personal development. But there's a lot of visionary things that just spawn out of sophomores all the time that don't get listened to. I feel like a lot of it goes to die, like that document did in my Google Docs for the last 2 years. But yeah, hopefully I didn't go too crazy on that first paragraph. But I think that's the best I can do for you right now. I'm trying to go back in time and think about what I was thinking and where I was.
And I had a very different mindset about that as well.
Yeah.
Because this document came right on the heels of, and I know I bring it up all the time, and it's going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, so I'm trying really hard not to.
No, go for it, brother.
But this document came on the heels of my outfit getting disbanded.
That was okay.
So that was when you read actions taken, they actively destroy the Aggie spirit and morale. It's that just sends me back to sophomore Boyle, who's I just hate the Corps right now, and I am I'm too stubborn to quit, but I don't want to be here.
You brought me. Thank you, Ben. You brought me back. That's kind of that.
So there was some of that. There may have been some tradition stuff, but I just don't remember. But I remember hitting this document and going, "This is the when you talk about pisshead Boyle, who's I don't understand what's going on," and then there's this document that comes along that's we need to be calling our leaders out and pursuing like the best of the core and not just whatever this new army or old army amalgamation was. This was where I really latched onto that.
You know, brother, and I feel like you definitely, just from my listening to you right now, and I think you latched onto that a lot because what you had, what you were attached to, was taken from you. Like you have your outfit culture, Squadron 4. This is you, and then that's taken from you, and now you have to redefine why you're here. Because if I'm not mistaken, like at least when I came into the Corps, it's like, oh, this is my outfit, hoorah, full send, I dude, I love B-Battery, okay, like Wildman for life, so that kind of deal. Like I'm sure the same thing for you, man. Squadron 4 fans, it's like that was you, and then having this little identity crisis type thing and trying to find out where you're gonna go next and everything.
Yeah.
Catalyzing this,
So, okay.
Sure, man. Oh, you want me to keep?
It's like I was about to say, that's like
Yeah.
15 minutes of setup for the
brother,
first paragraph. There we go.
Sure, yeah, we can just dissect this, man.
I told you this was going to be a long one.
All right. My bad.
No, it's fine.
Sorry, man.
It's fine.
Too much caffeine today, brother.
All right, let's keep going.
Not enough sleep. Yeah, let's keep going. Just stop me whenever.
Yeah.
So yeah, continuing onward. I believe that our hope lies in what makes any leadership organization successful, and that is the intentional pursuit of excellence in everything we do, down to the smallest detail, and as such must be actively communicated always. I think I'm probably going to stop myself there. I think some of the things we talked about, dude, that actively communicated reminds me of like the lack of communication during COVID, like the things that weren't passed down to us as underclassmen and also being upperclassmen at the same time as sophomores, right?
I think also one of my first sergeant when I was a sophomore, he said every problem in the Corps will boil down eventually to a problem in communication.
Yeah.
And we've seen that a lot this past year, at least in my outfit, where we had, hey, we want to be excellent, we want to pursue that excellence, we want to wake up and like everybody wants to make the outfit better. Nobody like joins the Corps and says, I just don't care about my outfit. Like even as a zip, you're like, no zip command team is just like, we're gonna let the outfit stagnate. It's like everybody wants to make the outfit better.
Absolutely.
The problem is that it doesn't always get communicated. It doesn't always make it from up here in your head down to in the hands and how you act it out. And so I love that that in the document here it's italicized, the intentional pursuit of excellence in everything we do, and actively communicated always is also italicized, because you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, agreed, bro. All right, so I guess going on from that for sure. So from every training time, every run, CR event, high LC event, interaction, hug, and brother/sisterhood, every academic activity, exam, drill card, every conversation, from north side to the back of Duncan, we must intentionally desire to be and act upon the idea of a leader. We must each embody the individual we most deeply desire to become, and do so in service to the world we live in, the people's lives we will inevitably touch, and to the organization we hold so dear, so that it can continue to be in service to our nation and to the world. From that comes the pride of being an Aggie, and it makes that brass shine just a little brighter. Pride is what is in the heart of every Aggie who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and is also why they did so. It is why we hold our traditions so dear and honor the old Ags the way we so characteristically do. Our pride has not left us yet, but we must stoke this flame of ages before it is snuffed out by the incredible challenges of our generation, just as the greatest generation succeeded in preventing.
Could break a lot down out of that.
That was a smoker of a paragraph. Be honest, man. I wonder how many bangs I'd had at that point.
You were definitely the poetic type writing this. Like, we're going for eloquence and big words.
Yeah, analogies and stuff, man. Yeah, no, I feel like, dude, I must have been feeling something that day. I know I was, for sure.
That second note, though, about we must embody the individual we most deeply desire to become and do so in service to the world we live in. That's such a great, like, for every sophomore out there, every freshman out there, like, that's it, man. If you take anything else from the Corps, like, look at those great leaders above you that you live with on a day-to-day basis, and just, like, that's, not to say that I did anything incredible, but that was my motivation waking up as a white belt was, I want to be like Grant Kirby. I want to be like Alex Partita. I want to be like these guys. I look up to these guys, and I feel like that shapes, that's so much of the value of the Corps right now, is that near proximity to people of really high character.
Dude, yeah, no, I completely agree. nothing better than a fantastic example when you're, an underclassman. You see this guy like, oh, he's such a stud, like that's the guy, There's still like people that I run into today, like my Zips, or even people that were Zips in any class year, whether I was a junior or sophomore or freshman. Like when I run into these people that were my upperclassmen, my mentors from outfitter across the quad, it's like, oh my God, here's this guy, what a great guy, and it motivates you, absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways too, there's also the same that can be said in, being the person that someone wasn't for you. And in a lot of ways, and I'm sure you've had this as well, we've all had this in our experience, but like, for example, not necessarily the bad examples, but the lack of examples sometimes.
Yeah.
If you ever go into in a time where you don't really have someone close to you that you look up to, right, and you feel alone. Kind of going a little into more of that sophomore, that abandonment feeling, but, like how do you start your own fire? How do you shine your own light, right? Because in a lot of ways in the Corps, we kind of, like the whole regurgitation thing, we also just kind of learn, when in Rome, and we kind of just go with the flow and don't really, for example, if you're going with the flow and the flow is nothing, then how are you going to produce any light, So in a lot of ways, it's you kind of have to start your own thing in a lot of ways. I think a really good friend of mine and fellow BQ, she's the band XO, her name is Lizzie Crittenden. It's one of the things that she used to say at band practice, her zip year, all this semester, fall semester. She would say, I'm butchering it completely. She said it great, so great. But yeah, basically be the person that someone wasn't for you. There's no greater joy, I think, in doing that. Now I'm gonna get a little nerdy here, but I'm a big God of War fan. And one of the things that Kratos says, if you're into the lore or anything, about basically the guy he was before and the guy he is now, basically be the man that you can be, the man that you want to be, right? And for example, a lot of my family too, like further on, for example, like my father didn't have a good father example, and so my dad's been a stellar father example for me. And it's funny enough, we shared that game together. He got me into that when I was a kid. We played it, but dude, I'll tell you, like seeing the strength that he had to be the person that someone wasn't for him, right, is kind of what I try to embody in a lot of ways. So yeah, for sure, definitely that. Good examples and bad examples, you can still find a way to be the person that the people below you need.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, and through listening too, like communication, bringing that back into, one of the best ways to do that is to listen to your people, to talk to them, have conversations with them outside of all these environments, get to know them as people, and then you'll start to know, kind of intrinsically, you'll start to feel like, this is what this person needs. They need a hug today, or they need an extra conversation, or a trip to Dunkin', or they just need the day off. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That kind of deal, yeah.
So good.
So I guess moving on.
Yep.
Second to last paragraph here, or actually third to last. So, from our fear has come a retreat. We have done the only thing we know to do in this situation. We see the sheer excellence of those that have come before us and seek to emulate them, for it seems the obvious choice in our situation. Instead of pushing the envelope further, we reach into simply copying the past for answers. Yet what we are missing is that the answer has been with us always. Now, before we get into what that answer is, I'm thinking a lot of this paragraph is basically, and you see this a lot around the quad, I'm sure you've seen it, Ben, I personally see it a lot too, is everybody loves Old Army.
Yep.
Everybody loves Old Army, and I love it to death, but I feel like there's a little too much, even to this day, of a idealization of the past Old Army, as if it was this perfect, untouchable thing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's awesome. Like, when I watch the videos, right, and I hear the stories my uncle told me, but then again, in hindsight, I know myself when I leave here, all I'm going to think about is the good times. All the great times that I had. I'm not going to think about the serious down times that I had and my buddies had. And so in a lot of ways, when we look retrospectively on the past, of course, in this paragraph, I'm pretty sure I'm referring to the disbandments and a lot of the stuff that happened. Like, from the fear came this retreat from our ideals, and we have like this complete restructuring of the Corps. And just from what I'd been hearing of upperclassmen talk about, Old Army's dead, Old Army's dead, you hear that forever. Yep. But the reason that happens, though, is because we think the past was perfect, and that it's like, dude, when they were here, they had an Old Army, and they were the new Army, right? And so that's us now, and we're going to be Old Army here pretty soon. Oh, it was so much better. So the cycle continues forever. So if you get into that ideal, it's very easy to get into this trap where you think, oh, Old Army's gone to hell, and then you don't do anything about it. And then all you do is post on your Instagram cool videos of the old times instead of spending that time and effort putting that towards something cool today.
Yeah.
Right? Now, no shade whatsoever towards those awesome videos, dude. I love those. In fact, shout out to New Chorister. I freaking love those videos.
Yep.
Man, and they motivate the hell out of me. But I'll tell you one thing too, though. We also absolutely have to put a focus on the future, because if we don't do that, then we'll never have that kind of stuff ever again.
I've had a couple of really good conversations with one of my heads, one of my rising juniors, who is very old Army, very old Army motivated. Mm-hmm. And I've had this conversation a couple of times with him now of, hey, let's look at what's realistic to the core. Not to say that, hey, we're sacrificing our tradition, because sure, there's some great outfit things that, like, let's bring that back. Let's talk about that again. Let's make XYZ thing a thing in the core again. And then there's some stuff like axe handling. It's like,
right.
That was old Army. In my opinion, that's probably something that we could let die.
Yeah, I believe so too.
Yeah, right.
Physical assault. Yeah.
Assault.
Good.
Probably could let that one go. Yeah. But I've had this ongoing conversation with him of what's good about old Army that we should be pursuing. What's that, like, the best parts that we look back on and we go, hey, this is what this is that meaningful part of what it means to be in the core, where you pull your history and your heritage from. And one of the other parts that's like, that was fun, but maybe that's not necessarily, we need that one thing specifically. Which hills are you willing to die on? And I think that's a lot of this conversation that this document is trying to start and is trying to bring up is, hey, let's talk about old Army in the light of they were real cadets. They weren't this mythic that we created. They had their own struggles, their own things that they did right and wrong. So let's pull from their lessons. Let's do what they did right and discard what they did wrong, and move on to some way that's better for the whole core moving forward, not just the propaganda machine that we're spitting out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, brother. I do.
Yeah. Here, it says, yet what we are missing is that the answer has been with us always. The Aggies of the past lived in the present too. When a challenge came before them, they beat the hell out of it, establishing the standards and traditions that we so uphold and revere today. They took initiative, responding to their modern challenges, and overcame them through their pursuit of excellence and pride in being a Texas Aggie. So, yeah, you called it.
There you go. Right.
Yeah, their challenges were, them being the past to us, they were living in their own modern times with their own modern challenges, and the decisions they made. The thing is that the reason we also, I think, in a lot of ways, the reason we revere them so much is because they showed what a lot of us feel, a lot of people of us now don't show, is that initiative to just whether it be a martyr or be willing to speak up against a majority or to be in a minority or whatever. They showed that gumption and that fight to do something and establish a tradition. Because I don't know about you, but do you see a lot of traditions being established today? I don't see it. And we have all these traditions. Where did they come from? They came from, well, hell, maybe we can call what we're doing a tradition, if it happens twice. But that kind of dealio, I see a lot of us thinking that was a superpower of the past, when in reality, everyone from fish through zip has the absolute power at any moment to start a tradition. And we can absolutely, through intentionality and, again, communication, make that an intentional, good tradition.
Yeah. I think so often we get lost in that idolization of old Army and just saying, we're talking about traditions and saying, like, this is how they did it, so it must have been perfect. This is how they did it, and we need to bring that back. And you can always make an argument for that. May or may not be a valid argument. But there is that question you have to ask of the intentionality of, like, hey, is this a tradition that is going to further develop the core, or is it going to harm the core?
Yes.
Or does it fall somewhere in this weird third category of, is this just something that's fun? I think so often. I think so often, when the commandant staff tells us about, like, little T traditions, it feels like they're missing out on that fun aspect of, if there's some traditions that, like, there's not really any value added, but it's fun and it's harmless. Like, there's a lot of midnight yell traditions that are kind of like that. It's like, hey, the whole outfit's gonna dress up with one theme. Where we're gonna all do XYZ at midnight yell together, and to some extent, like, hey, as long as you're not harming people or like hazing, right? The H word. Like, there's some little T traditions that are just there for the fun of it, but that real question you have to ask is, like, hey, are we idolizing old Army because they were really developing leaders and developing culture and continuing the Aggie spirit, Or do we just want to do it because that's the way they did it? Like,
Right, yeah.
how much thought are you putting into your traditions and your respect for Old Army?
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think in a lot of ways too, we've kind of like lost this idea of like what we can and can't do. Now, I think it's kind of a sign of the times too, because I'll be honest with you, Ben. We've got cell phones, we've got video cameras, we've got all kinds of data acquiring, moment capturing devices, and anyone can make anything look 10 times worse than it actually is. Not to say that hasn't been a good thing in a lot of ways too, capturing things that don't need to happen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then in a lot of ways too, it invokes a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear. Like from our fear have come, like I think I said earlier, from our fear has come a retreat. There's a lot of fear in like, oh, I can't do that, or oh, I'm gonna get in trouble, or oh, you know. I'll give one example that I might be totally busted and wrong in this, but when I was being a BQ, right, being in the band, okay, the band is such an official thing. It is, from being a part of it, I've seen it is so much bigger than every single one of us. It's so much bigger than even the directors. It is so incredibly crucial, just the band itself as an idea, as a concept, as a thing, right? It is so much. It's bigger. It's literally. You know, people come to football games sometimes just to watch the band. I've seen it, and I thought it was like a joke at first, but then I realized people do. Mm-hmm. The band in itself has become this huge part of A&M, and A&M is worth so much money now. So many things that have gone to monetize the Aggie experience, and not to say it's a bad thing. I mean, hell, there's scholarships going left and right. People are getting more people admitted to this great university, and the university is growing, and I'm all for that. But I'll tell you, being in the band, you know, there were some things we were told, like, oh, you can't just play your instrument out. On, like, for example, we're walking back from a game. You can't just, I was always told, don't do that. Like, that's unbecoming. That's kind of bad, you know. We don't, because you think of it this way, what if we just, let's say a bunch of trumpets. We're like, hey, let's improvise this funny little line. And we started playing some really crappy horn playing whatever, right? Because we didn't practice it or anything. Right. Someone gets that on video and you're in uniform, and that's the Aggie Band now on YouTube. That's the example I've always kind of been given, is that general idea, right? So just don't play your instrument. And so then you have all these beautiful moments that probably happened at Old Army where these guys are just jacking around with their horn, you know, and playing their drum for fun. And now it's like, don't do that, you know. That's a super, like, it's a sin. Like, don't do that. You know what I mean? And also Midnight Yell too. There's tons of, for example, we love costumes. Yep. Personal story. I was redneck fish. For BBAT, and we had this like overalls and like in a pink and black plaid button-up shirt with camo overalls and cowboy boots and a big red perm wig. And it was so awesome. Man. It really went well with my Latin complexion. I
wasn't gonna say it, but
I know. Yeah, it's fine, dude. Go for it, man. But yeah, no, it was. I thought that was super cool, but then, you know, hearing, oh, hey, costumes are canceled for Midnight Yell, or hey, you just can't do anything too crazy, right? Which, of course, nothing too crazy, that makes sense. But then again, there's a lot of fun things that you can't do, and everyone's worried, like, is that too much? Like, there's been times when I'm trying to plan an outfit and I have this really cool idea, and then I'm like, well, it's probably going to be okay, but what if someone says something, and then this and that, and it looks unbecoming of the Aggie Band, and you have it. So that's one of the, I think, just from my own personal example of some of like these ideas of, you know, the fear of, you know, being captured on and immortalized, and anyone can always bring up something you said or did or whatever, which just simply wasn't present in the past. And so it changes the way that we act, and we are a lot less, not to say we're any less brave, we're intelligent, and we understand that the consequences of our actions today weigh 10 times than what they did in the past.
All right, that last monster of a paragraph.
Yeah, let's hit it. And I'll just throw that last little tiny paragraph on top of it.
Yep.
So I firsthand grew up with prime examples of Aggie spirit and pride in my family, that being my grandfather and uncle, who were both cadets. I'm blessed to have this perspective, as many of us here today. They are my motivation and passion behind surviving and thriving throughout the relentless grind that is the Corps of Cadets. I do not want to see this Corps die. It has done so much good for the world through the leaders of character it produces. Yet the current climate trajectory of the Corps suggests that we will soon lose that divine ability to develop the best individuals in the world for the world. None of us want to see this happen, yet we must stand by and watch as our traditions crumble before us, or we must not. It is within each and every one of our power to intentionally encourage good change within our outfits. It is our duty to remember that what has always made the best leadership organization in the world, military or not, what it has so famously always been. If this is student leadership, then let it be just that. Let us take this bull by the horns, no matter your rank, title, or class year. Let us do what we have always done best, and can do better than those who seek to simply manage us. Let us not pursue new army or old army. Let us pursue best army. Can I run through that wall real quick?
Yeah, right?
Pisshead Marcus.
Right? Spitting, dude.
Oh.
That's it right
If
there,
I do
man.
say so myself.
No, every now and then you just get hit with a lightning bolt
Yeah.
like that.
Ben, thank you for sending this to me, man. I definitely needed to read this. I know I've only got 2 weeks left, but
Yeah.
there's been a lot of conversations happening, at least on my part, with underclassmen in these last, because I want to wrap up these menteeships and mentorships and whatnot. And a lot of things. I think it's funny we talked about the difference between the past and today, but now after I've read the whole thing, I feel like there's so much of this conversation that is the same as it was. Same as probably it's always been, if we're going to be completely honest, given the nature of things.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you think?
I think the best army phrasing, in light of old army and new army, is kind of corny, but it gets at this.
I
It gets. It gets us at this idea though of, and again, we talked about how much we idolize old army and we fear new army, and we kind of just throw out this idea that there's good in both. That the core and the beauty of the core is that it continues to evolve, not to adapt to the world, but to the culture, but to produce the best leaders for the culture.
Yeah,
right?
I see what
We're
you're
not,
differentiating there, yeah.
and part of that is like, yep, you got to leave some of the old army behind, and yep, you got to accept some of the new army. But you want to, pull it all the way back around to the start. You can't just do it for the sake of doing it. You got to do it because we're being intentional, and we're like everything. Talk all the time about intentionality in your activities and intentionality in your leadership, but it's got to have that idea, that goal of, hey, we're going to adapt the core. Yep, the core's not going to look the same as when I was a freshman, but the goal is not, as much as the commandant's not going to want to hear this, the goal of changing the core is not that everybody can make it through the core.
Yeah.
The goal of changing the core is that we produce the best leaders for the culture, and the culture that needed, the leaders that culture needed in 2000 and in 1990 and in 1980 and 1945 is not the type of leaders that the Corps needs in 2024 and 2020 or 2025 and 2050 and beyond, right? So there's going to be change, and we have to embrace that change in that pursuit of what is best Army.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, for sure. And I think, a lot of that, and you brought this up. I think that a lot of the conversation, ever since I was a freshman too, was the position of the commandant and the effect that this human being has over the Corps. Huge impact. I'll tell you what.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, there has definitely never been a commandant that was popular. Never. That's the nature of the position. But I'll tell you what, there is, at least for me, a baseline mega respect that I have for every single person who stepped up to that position, because what if I asked you, Ben, to solve the Corps right now? Because that's what we're asking him to do. And there he presents us with this idea, and it's utterly imperfect. Of course it's going to be, And that's one thing just from my personal perspective. Look, I don't think what his idea was a great idea at all. I don't think it was maybe it was a step in the right direction, at least in the sense of let's try something, but that was just about it. But that's also okay, and I feel like that's something we need to be a little more graceful as a student body, because we are student leaders, is to be more graceful with those above us who, yes, there are commanders, and yes, there are leaders, and yes, they're experienced, but also they're human, and they also care a lot too. I mean, I get my haircuts at Northgate Barbershop, and there's a picture of him getting his fish cut. Like, he's one of us. We forget that. But as for the future of the Corps and everything, I think we just need to have more dialogue, more conversations. And I'll tell you and I love history. My mother is super into American Revolutionary history, and she talks about it all the time. And I'll tell you, from what I've learned, I've read some of her books too. That John Adams book by McCullough. I've read some of that.
Great book.
It's fantastic, right? Some of the greatest things that we have as a country came from simple tea conversations. Tea and crumpets. That was it. And a couple guys who wanted to talk a little bit, and then that spurred this and spurred that, and boom, you have the United States of America. Like, that's how that happens. But we think it's like this big magical thing, but magic really isn't that hard. It's a conversation, you know? And I feel like we should do, I mean, as for this to work, I mean, this is the Commandant's first year, right? First full year in this position. Give it time. And the fact that, you know, obviously he's going to, I'm going to tell a quick story here, just from the eyes of me as a Zip during the ILC. Okay, and just to give a little background, I'm sure everyone listening knows. With it's the International Leadership Conference or intentional. There we go. Intentional international, same word, right?
Yeah.
Aggie moment, but Intentional Leadership Conference. Okay, the keynote speaker, our new president, General Mark Welsh. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to comment the greatest, probably just like example of a speech in general I've ever heard in my life. 5 great points. Each one of them contained a story that was memorable and had a lesson. And he did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
He basically did the structure of how you tell stories, how humans have told stories since 200,000 years ago when we first evolved. Like, that's how you do it. First of all, he did that. Obviously, he has a stellar resume, and he is the guy. I've heard from people, let's Dr. Keller, my current science professor and director of the Hollingsworth Center, has told me that he's the guy. Like, he's worked for him too in the Air Force. During that conversation, or during that speech, General Welsh did this really cool thing. This, if you don't remember, this was at the peak of the Commandant bringing out, I'm going to say it, fish storms. And here you have the whole Corps erupting. What is this madness? What is this crazy change, right? And of course, I'd never heard a word from the Commandant myself, and he's the guy who had the idea, right?
Yep.
Now, that's probably my fault, because as far as I know, there were some letters getting put out, so I'm not the most informed. But being just a random sample of the populace, this is my perspective. Going into the keynote speaker, I remember General Welsh talked about how you can't make changes in a day, and you also can't make changes about you. And I'll tell you what he did when he said those 2 things. He looked directly at the Commandant.
Mm-hmm.
And he addressed him by his first name and everything, too, which was, watching this go down was like, what General Welsh did is he destroyed the in and out group that had been created by putting the Commandant and the entire Cadet Corps in the exact same audience and speaking to us both. And he also told us what we were doing wrong, we weren't listening, or that we weren't being, like I said, as graceful as we needed to be. At least that's kind of what I got from it too.
Yeah.
And our need to be more intentional. But man, was that, if you could watch Michael Jordan slam dunk at his prime, okay, after a lob from Scottie Pippen, that was what in the terms of speaking, that's what General Welsh did that day. Very respectfully to the cadet body, and also to the Commandant.
Oh, and it wasn't a diss track either. It was like, hey, let's talk about lessons learned.
Legitimately. Right. And he all did it through the proxy of, hey, here's this talk about leadership. I mean, he wasn't directly addressing this issue, and yet there he was, directly addressing the issue, nonchalantly, and absolutely, I'd say, whether you noticed it or not, if you were a cadet that day, you were put into this group with the Commandant. And in that way, he healed us a lot, because from what I remember, I didn't really see as many meme page posts after that. Which is because a lot of leadership is subconscious and vibes. I know it sounds funky to say, but it's all about how you feel about someone, if they're a good guy or not. You know?
Yeah.
And I feel like in a lot of ways he repaired it that day. So, stellar guy. But that's, I guess, where I was going with that. Basically, in having a little more trust in our leaders, we have to give a little, but we also have to be a little more intentional. We have to listen a little more, and we need to be a little more retrospective. And, you know, it's funny. I could probably say the same thing to Pisshead Marquez, and he'd be like, "You're full of shit." and that's okay. But that's where you have to meet people. You have to be able to look someone in the eyes, and they tell you you're full of shit, and then you keep going, and you keep having those conversations, and you keep talking. Because at the end of the day, you know, I'll invoke this line of the opening ceremonies from the FFA, and I loved the FFA to death when I was in high school. But one of the greatest lines was basically talking about the president, the leader, uniting us under the glorious sunlight of brotherhood and cooperation. Now, I know that sounds cheesy.
It sounds a little communist.
I mean,
you know?
Again, nerding out.
A little Red Scare.
yeah, right. Again, nerding out if you're a Dark Souls fan. Praise the sun. Okay.
Yep.
But I'm serious, man. That is the idea. We must, at least that I've tried to profess myself within just my sphere of influence and people that I know and my actions, but let's be intentional and have a little faith and have a little grace, have respect. It's all about respect. In fact, my best friend, his name is Jacob Copeland, been my best friend since We both attended. We're in the same major. We're geology majors together. We attended a camp for miners before we came here, introducing us to the college. He told me this the other day, dealing with just some issue I had, and he said, and basically this issue was about dealing with disrespectful people and how to continue through that, because you have to. He talked about respect and about courtesy. Give people the courtesy. And dude, if we talk about like the political state of the United States, right after the 2016 election, 2022 election, okay, all that jazz, okay, the polarization of honestly modern society, that's totally affected the core in a lot of ways, because we're a member of that society, and we have this. We just want to polarize, and we want to in and out group, and we want to have enemies, and it's so easy nowadays with our echo chambers and whatnot. You name it. But dude, if we just had a little more respect and gave people courtesy, the courtesy of a conversation, like I've had, like there's people I've talked to that would say things about the Commandant, and from what I'm getting from their vibes, right, is that this person would not be willing to have a conversation with the Commandant, and if they did, they would approach the entire thing as if they're the enemy, and in fact, you both have that A&M patch on your shoulder, the AMU on your shoulder. That's the patch that you both wear because you're on the same team. And we just sometimes get a little confused in that. So that's kind of just the way I've always looked at it. And I never really get too vocal about it. I'm kind of a people pleaser, and I also don't really like to stir the pot too much. I like to kind of just talk about things, and because there's no point in starting a fight, yelling fire in a crowded room. But that's just kind of what I think. Since you've asked me, that's kind of that's what's directed, at least my actions, if not my words, my actions, is those sentiments. So,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Van, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask.
Sure.
Just talking about those polarizations and seeing, using an example, old army, new army, best army in the middle. I kind of see it, I guess, as a World War I battleground. You've got the two trenches, then you've got the no man's land.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like a lot of that good is when people put the rifles down on that Christmas and they meet no man's land. So I guess for who knows, the squad leads, the fire team leaders, heck, fish buddies, who maybe just interact with 4 or 5 people, how do they face that fear and step into that middle ground and encourage others to join them in no man's land?
Dude, what a beautiful analogy, by the way, the World War I Christmas thing, playing soccer on the no man's land, dude. Yeah, and a great question too. That's the real question, because we all have that fear. We all do. How do you step into that? I'm gonna pull a John Wayne quote out. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but it's about courage, right? And in fact, my book that I'm reading for Psalms right now, the core leadership class, it's moral courage, right? Courage is not the absence of fear, right? But it's basically being willing to saddle up, even when you're scared to death. Just like every single one of us wakes up every morning to go to PT, whether you're the fastest runner or fat BQ at the back, whatever you are, you wake up in the morning and you get up there and you do it. From what I've learned from my uncle, my grandfather, who've both been in the Corps, and the Corps has brought both of them to their knees at some point, myself included. They have approached life and the challenges that were even greater that life presented them. And I won't go into details, but they've had big challenges, and they've overcome them and just built from them even so much more. They had the emotional maturity that is characteristic of the Corps of Cadets to do it, to literally just do it, to no matter what the risks were, whatever the consequences were. I've noticed this in myself. Like as a freshman, I did so many things as a freshman in the Corps. I'm sure you can remember that I cannot even fathom doing. Like I was that crazy to go do that kind of I put myself in that kind of situation where I could be embarrassed or said this, just like all these risky spur of the moment dealio kind of, what I'm talking about? Yeah, that kind of thing. Just having the red assness, right? That's characteristic of the Corps Cadets to just go wrestle a bull. Have you ever brought a steer to the ground? Me neither. I've never done that. That's too scary. But that's what we need to do, man. But we do that. We do that every day when we get up and we have the courage to say that I'm worthy to live this day, that I'm worthy to get up and put on my uniform. Because is that not a statement of leadership? When you go to class, and I know this from I had to take engineering, math, and chemistry and all that stuff for my geophysics major. I switched to geology. Still the same thing, but I can cut that out. But yeah, basically, when you're in those group projects, people always look to you, the cadet. They look to the person in uniform. They look to that person to be a leader, and for example, just simple things as opening doors for people on campus, or being that or for example, today in Musters very soon. I was in the MSC today, and there were people honoring. There's a guy who lost his son over there, his former band's guy. A couple other people that I know that had people in there, and just being a conversation, saying howdy, and being a cadet in uniform. Just kind of the service that we give, right? Being willing to be the person to say that I'm worth doing that. Like, I absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit of a tangent freshman year, but I remember I was met with a lot of don't wear, for example, if you're caught wearing a uniform off campus, instant meme page, which I get a little bit.
Valid.
No false valor here, dude. But I'll also tell you that also invokes a lot of fear of it invokes a dissociation with the thing that we're supposed to hold so dear. You feel like this embarrassment of, this self-consciousness, I'm in uniform, or, I don't deserve to be doing, I don't need to be doing that. So then it invokes a lot of subconsciously, a lot of shame psychologically that we don't diagnose, and it stays subconscious. And then you lose this pride of what we have, what we are, what we see in Old Army, what we could totally be today. I promise you, dude, if you were just the cadet, to go and hold the door open for someone, or address a lady as ma'am, right, or do some of those things that are characteristic of the Corps, of that honor, and like saying that I can be this honorable person. The cadet values: courage, honor, integrity, discipline, self-service, respect. Actually, kind of live those out a little bit. Have the willingness to say that I do live those values. That's the answer to the fear, in my opinion, is, through pride in what we are and taking ownership of what we are, and then going forth with full faith that it's going to work, and then having the courage, even though you're full of fear, to just go out there and do it. Be a cadet. Be that awesome cadet you want to be. You can always now self-actualization. We can talk about that forever. It's not easy, right? There's that gap between, this is perfect. I'm going to be this perfect cadet, and then you wake up in the morning, you're like, man, I really didn't want to go to chemistry, and that rack is so nice, and your legs are so sore. But I'll tell you what, man, there is such strength that'll follow you for the rest of your life because we were willing to put up with this bullshit for 4 years. Willing to put up with the situations the Corps creates, the sleep deprivation, the food. Whoop! I love Dunkin', man. I don't know how my stomach's gonna react when I don't have that at least in my system once for the year, But I'll tell you what. I've seen it at my grandpa, I've seen it at my uncle, but it'll drive you forward. So we just need to invoke a bit more of that now. Because hell, man, if we're willing to, I know we're all tired. If we're willing to be up here doing this podcast, and we got 30 minutes to be in bed to get 8 hours, right? If we're willing to do that, then let's also have the courage, because we already do so many badass things every day. We just forget because it becomes the norm. My God, before 10 a.m., I've done more things than the average non-reg. And I'm not hating on the non-reg, but I'll tell you, than they do in the day. But I'm telling you what, though, we think that, PT is just PT. Dude, you ran 3 miles this morning. You did that. Yeah, it was with your outfit, but you did that. You ran 3 miles. You had an intentional conversation with a freshman or a sophomore, even one of your upperclassmen mentored you. You got to experience Duncan Dunning Hall. All those things. You did that today. And we forget that. So on my dark days, whenever I'm like, I did nothing today, I was so unproductive, it's like, no, at the baseline, I was a cadet in the Corps. Man, proud of myself. Am I all the time? Hell no. But I'll tell you what, that's how we beat that fear, how we beat the hell out of that fear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And let me tell you one thing. You think we beat Texas every time?
No.
Hell no, we didn't. They were so much better than we were until the Junction Boys came along. But I'll tell you, the Aggie spirit was absolutely formed through just constant failure, constant inadequacy. Aggie jokes. All that stuff comes from being the underdog. But there's such beauty in that too, because underdogs, they know what's up. They know how to work for it. The hardest workers in the room are always Aggies. So I feel like if we just do that, we just focus on that, remember that, because we're already doing it. When you just completely change the playing field, you don't need to get rid of that fear, because it's not, you know what I'm saying? It just doesn't connect. It's two separate realities. So subscribe to the reality. Again, this is me being as existentialist, but subscribe to the reality that benefits you and the people around you.
That's so good, man. Wait, this one's getting a little long.
Yeah.
I would say
Feel free to cut out whatever you need to, brother.
cut it there. Stick around. There's gonna be a part 2.
Hell yeah.
We'll run it back. We're gonna talk about leadership and drama and fighting for some of that that meaning that you're talking about in senior year.
So I'll preface it with this: no matter what it is that you're doing, if it's for the good of others, and you benefit none from it, obviously save yourself in the end. That's a big lesson, but 100% throw caution to the wind, because John 15:13, right? Remember that.
Yep.
Always remember that.
All right, don't go anywhere. We will be right back with Matt Marquez, part 2, leadership discussions.
Thank you, Ben.